Hi, this is Tamara from mooglyblog.com, and in this video I'll be demonstrating how to crochet the Paloma Cardigan, which is a free pattern you'll find on mooglyblog.com. Please go to the link in the description. There you'll find both right and left-handed video tutorials and a link out to the written pattern and all of the supplies you need. To make this pattern, you'll want Red Heart Amore, 5 to 9 balls depending on the size you're making. You'll also need a USI 5.5 millimeter hook. This one is by Clover. It's a Clover Amore. And of course, you'll also need your standard crochet supplies like a yarn needle, stitch markers, and scissors. I also do recommend that you print out the pattern for this pattern. Print it out in a paper form because this pattern does come in 4 different sizes. There's a small medium, a large extra large, a 2X 3X, and a 4X 5X. There will be different numbers depending on the size you need. So you can see I've got my printed out copy right here. If you have trouble with the print friendly button, sometimes it likes to glitch. I provide it on the site as a service, but I don't actually control it. So if it's not working for you, go ahead and copy and paste into a Word document or whatever works for you. You could even take screenshots and take notes right on your device. So let's go ahead and take a look at the finished sweater. Now for myself, I made the large/extra large size, so it's a little hard to all fit on the table here where I crochet for you. But you can see right here is the bottom hem, and here is the top featuring the great mesh look. Here you can see a couple pictures of me modeling the sweater, so you can see what it looks like rather when it's on. And then if we come back to the table here, you can see even better how the shoulder mesh sort of decreases down the sleeve and then follows the sleeve right on down to the cuff right there. And then of course the cuffs at the end of the sleeves and the bottom hem have just a little bit of ribbing. This is purely decorative, it's not functional at all. So if you don't like ribbing, you could just do straight edges, whatever works for you. You can also add rows here in the front and on the back to make it longer if you prefer. As you saw in the pictures, this is a shorter, almost jacket style cardigan. Not quite as short as a bolero, but certainly not the long oversized cardigans that I've made in the past. This is a little different. So now let's go ahead and take a look at how it all comes together. Okay, so the first row you actually make in this pattern is right here, the bottom back row. This hem is added later. So you start here and you'll actually crochet up. This section is called the back waist. I've divided this written pattern into several sections to make it a little easier to follow. These are just rows worked totally even. The number of stitches depends on your size, so check the written pattern for that, until we get right up here where we switch on our instructions to the back shoulders. At the back shoulders, we come in a little bit to give us a little bit of a notch to put our sleeves into and to narrow it a little bit for the shoulders. Then we work even again in rows until we come up here to this section, which is labeled the back mesh, and we work this V-stitch mesh in rows. We add the sleeves later. So here's our rows right here, right up to here. Then we're going to split for the left and right front sides. So let me flip this sweater over. All right, so when we come to the front of the sweater, we're crocheting down towards the hem at this point, and we'll work the sides individually. So we've got a front mesh, a front shoulder, then we have to widen back out to match the width here, make that front notch for the sleeves again, and then we've got the front waist is just what I've labeled this section. This makes it a little bit easier to count your rows and keep track of the pattern. After you've made both sides then, you can come back and add the sleeves and the hem and the final edging. So let's take a look at some of these stitches together now. All right, so the first row of the Paloma Cardigan is made in foundation double crochet. I do have a separate tutorial for this on the Moogly Blog YouTube channel and linked at the link in the description, so you can check that out separately. If you don't like the foundation crochet rows, you can just work a chain and then double crochet back into the chain. Just make sure you have the same number of double crochets as called for as foundation double crochets for your size. So for instance, for the small medium, that would be 74. For the large extra large, that would be 89, or 101 for the 2X 3X, or 116 for the 4X 5X. Again, if you prefer to chain, that's great. It works just as well. It just won't be quite as stretchy. Foundation stitches have a little more stretch. So if you want a little more stretch right there at the back waist, you'll want to try the foundation stitches. After that, rows 2 through 20 are all the same. Now, I like to start these rows with a chainless starting double crochet, but if you prefer, you can start with a simple chain 3 instead, or chain 2 and double crochet in the first stitch, whatever your preferred method of starting a row of double crochet is. I really like the chainless starting double crochet, which I've just made here, and I do have, again, a separate tutorial on this linked out. I just find it gives it a nice neat edge here, looks a little bit more like a double crochet, but we'll be seaming these edges together anyway, so if you can't quite get it or you don't like it, go ahead and make a chain 3. After that, we are going to front loop only, extended half double crochet across until 1 stitch remains. This is a fun little twist on the half double crochet stitch, and by working in the front loop only and making the extended version, this creates additional drape than we would get with a standard stitch worked under both loops or a standard half double crochet. So to make these, we yarn over, then we go under the front loop only of that stitch, the front loop being the loop of the top V that is always closest to you, the crocheter. We yarn over, pull up our loop, yarn over, pull through just 1 loop, and then finally yarn over to pull through all 3 to finish the half double crochet. So that's one extended half double crochet worked in the front loop only. So we're going to continue making those all the way across this row until we have just 1 stitch remaining. So let's do another one slowly together. I'm going to yarn over, go under the front loop only of the next stitch. You can see that back one still hanging out back there. Yarn over, pull up my loop, yarn over, pull through the first loop, then yarn over and pull through all 3. So as I say, we'll just continue doing this all the way across your first row here until you get to the point where you have just 1 stitch left. So that's where I'll see you here in just a few moments. All right, so I've worked all the way across here for row 2 until I have just 1 stitch remaining. So in this very last stitch, I'm just going to make a standard double crochet going underneath both of those loops. I just like to give these edges a little extra stability where we're going to seam them together while maintaining the drape of the stitches in between. Now you can see by working in the front loop only, when I turn back this way, we have a ridge of stitches here. That's that back loop that did not get worked. Something else I want to point out, let's go ahead and make row 3 together. At this point, we're going to be working into stitches that are extended half double crochets, but we're doing the same thing again. Rows 2 through 20 or 22, depending on the size you're making, are all exactly the same here in the back waist section. So you can consult your instructions for the size you are making, absolutely. And if you wanted to add extra rows here, if you like the cardigan a little longer and you want to make it a little longer, or for that matter shorter than I did, you would add rows in this section, back waist rows 2 through 20 or 22. This is where you would go ahead and add some extra rows. Just take a note of how many you've added so that you can add them to the fronts as well. Now, the thing I wanted to point out here, even though this is exactly like the previous row, is that at this point, again, you're going to be working into extended half double crochet stitches. And this can be a little confusing when you're working in the front loop only. And I want to show you why. Let me go ahead and pull my loop up here so I can put my hook down. When we work into the front loop only, again, we're just working into that loop closest to us. But because these are half double crochet stitches, when we do that yarn over and pull through 3 loops, it creates an additional line back here. So right here, let me use my hook to pick it up, is the, what's the word I'm looking for? The horizontal stitch on the back of our half double crochets. This can be misinterpreted as the front loop. If we turn our work forward here a little bit though, we can see these 2 here are actually the 2 loops at the top of each stitch. This is the top V. So that would make this loop here that I've just grabbed with my hook the front loop, not this one down here. So this can be a little tricky. If you get lost, just turn it over, look for that top V. That's the front loop you want to be working under, not this one back here. This is part of the half double crochet stitch. In fact, let me go ahead and take one of these stitches here and I'll flip it over right away so you can see that horizontal line we've created. Remember, I yarn over, go under that front loop only, which is going to be this one up here. If we flip it over, you can see there's that back loop. I'll pull up my loop, yarn over, pull through 1, and then pull through all 3. And this strand right here in the middle is what's going to create that vertical bar. When I pull through all 3 and turn it over, right here, and it's a little harder to see because it's the first one, of course. There we go. But that loop right there is what created that bar right there that can often be misinterpreted as the front loop. It is not. So when you come back and work the other direction, make sure that you're working under the front loop and not the horizontal bar of the half double crochet that you made in the previous row. As I said though, otherwise, these are all the same. Go ahead and work the length you want for your back waist, and then we'll work some back shoulders together. All right, now obviously I'm making just a little swatch version of the sweater here so I can demo the stitches. So at this point, you should have 20 to 22 rows or more or less if you've decided to alter the pattern. Then we're ready to begin the back shoulders. For row 1 of the back shoulders, we are going to slip stitch in the first 4 stitches for the small, medium, and the large, extra large, or the first 7 stitches for the 2x through the 5x. So, without chaining, we are just going to go right into that first stitch and make a slip stitch. Now we will want to come back and work into these stitches later. So a good tip for slip stitches that you know you're going to want to crochet into later is to make sure that when you pull up that loop, you pull it up nice and high so you can move your hook right through there nice and easily before you pull that second loop through to finish your slip stitch. So we're going to do that in, like I say, 4 or 7 stitches depending on which size you are making. So there's 3 and 4. And since we're just on a little swatch, that's where I'm going to stop. Then you're going to either chain 3 or chainless starting double crochet in that same stitch as the last slip stitch. So I'll just pull my loop up here and make my chainless starting double crochet. You can start that row however you like for a double crochet row, like so. Then we are just going to front loop only, extended half double crochet again across until 4 or 7 stitches remain, again depending on your size. So just as before, these are front loop only, extended half double crochet stitches. So I will see you when we have 4 or, depending on what size you're making, 7 stitches left. Okay, so for row 1 of the back shoulders, I've crocheted across until I have 4 or, depending on the size, 7 stitches left. Then I'm just going to double crochet in the next stitch and leave those last few stitches unworked. So again, if you've made one of the smaller 2 sizes, you will have eliminated 6 stitches, 3 at the beginning and 3 at the end. If you are making one of the larger sizes, you will have eliminated a total of 12 stitches, 6 at each end. So that will change your stitch count that little bit. After that, you're going to continue working evenly, just as we did these rows down here. Of course, just a little bit shorter, only work into the previous row. And the number of rows here for the back shoulders will depend on what size you're making. So for the smallest size, you would make 7 rows just like this, just as before, but only start over your count here with row 1, 7 stitches total, 9, 11, or 13. Again, check your written pattern so you can see which number applies to your size. I'll go ahead and add a couple more rows here just for demonstration purposes, and then we will switch over to the back mesh. Okay, so on our tiny waist, we've got our back waist section and our back shoulders. Now we're ready to begin the back mesh. We're going to go ahead and come back the other direction here, of course, and start again with your chainless starting double crochet or your chain 3. Point is just to get a double crochet or its equivalent worked in that first stitch. After that, you are going to skip the next stitch and front loop only V-stitch in the next stitch. Now, the V-stitch can mean different things in different patterns. For this pattern, it's a double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, worked into the same stitch. But do take note, we're going to be, again, doing this in the front loop only. So I've yarned over, I'll go in that stitch, under that front loop only, make a double crochet, chain 1, and then double crochet right back in that front loop. Now, after that, we can begin our repeats. We are going to skip the next 2 stitches, so 1 and 2, and work a front loop only V-stitch in the next stitch. And that's our repeat until we get almost all the way across. So I'll make a V-stitch here with a double crochet, chain 1, and a double crochet. Then I skip 2, 1, 2, front loop only V-stitch in the next stitch. And because we're on our little swatch here, there will only be a few V-stitches. The number of V-stitches will, of course, depend on which size you are making. See, I skipped 2. Oops, there we go. Front loop only V-stitch in this one. And as you continue across, you'll keep making, oops, didn't quite finish that one. There we go. You'll keep making V-stitches until only 2 stitches remain here. You can see there are just 2 stitches left at the end of our row. So we'll skip the next one and just make a double crochet in the very last stitch. And that mirrors, of course, how we started our row. So at the end of the first row of back mesh, you should have 22, 27, 29, or 34 V-stitches, depending on the size you've made. Then we can continue rows 2 through 10 of the back mesh, which are all the same, and it's the same number of rows for all sizes. So we're just going to go ahead and turn. Let me, pull up some more yarn here, fiddling a little bit with my hook as I'm trying to pull up more yarn. There we go. All right, so as I was saying, we start each row with our chainless starting double crochet or chain 3, or whatever double crochet substitute you prefer. And then for rows 2 through 10 of the mesh here, we're just going to come over to that chain 1 space in the middle of the first V and make another V-stitch. Double crochet, chain 1, double crochet. And that's how we continue across. Jump over to the next chain 1 space, make another V-stitch. Double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, right into that chain 1 space. Go to the next one. Don't worry about working into any of these V-stitches, or excuse me, don't worry about working into any of the double crochets. That will come up a little bit later, but right now for rows 2 through 10 of the back mesh, you're just working into those chain 1 spaces until you get to the very end here. And then after you made a V-stitch in the very last V-stitch, you just finished off with a double crochet in the top of that double crochet at the end. So you would just continue doing that for another 8 rows to create that back V-stitch mesh. After you've made row 10 of the back mesh, you'll need to place a stitch marker. Let me go ahead and pull up a stitch marker. And then the other thing you'll need to do, let me get my stitch marker up here ready to use, is you're going to need to again consult your written instructions for this point. You're going to need to place the stitch marker in double crochet number 22, 28, 30, or 34, depending on, again, which size you're making. So obviously I don't have that many V stitches here in this one, but when you place that stitch marker, rather than counting the V's or the chain 1s, you're just going to count the double crochets. So let's say for the sake of argument, I wanted to put the stitch marker in the 6th double crochet of my tiny little row here. I would count them 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I would go ahead and put my stitch marker right in the top of that double crochet. This is going to be important when we work that second half front. We make one half of the front and then the other half. So that's where we want to make sure to place that stitch marker. And make sure you leave it there while you work the entire first half front, because you'll want to have that marked for when you come back and make the second half front. So let's go ahead and begin our left front mesh together, which will be the right front if you're left-handed. Okay, so the left front mesh, again, right front if you're left-handed, is where we begin working just half of the width of the project so that we can create the cardigan shape. So we're just going to continue working up over the shoulder at this point and then working down along the front. So essentially we want to maintain the mesh pattern while creating a split through the middle. So you can see I've actually moved my stitch marker here. Number 6 would not have been right for our tiny little sample. I'll have to figure that one out here kind of as I go. Again, follow the written pattern to know which stitch to put your stitch marker into. So I'm going to go ahead and begin again with a chainless starting double crochet for row 1 of the left front mesh. And again, of course, you can do a chain 3 if you prefer. Then I would just continue making V-stitches in the chain 1 spaces of the previous V-stitches, just as I did before, until I get to the number indicated in the pattern. The number of V-stitches that you're going to work here is written out in the pattern, so you'll need to check the written pattern for your number. It will be 10, 13, 14, or 16, again, depending on size. Then, when you've made those, you will end up skipping the last double crochet of the V-stitch you worked into. So the last V-stitch that you worked into, it's got that second double crochet right there. You'll end up skipping that one and then double crocheting into the stitch after that. Now it's not necessarily where your stitch marker is going to be. For some sizes it will be. On our little sample here, doesn't quite work out either, but we're just going to go ahead and leave it there now for the sake of demonstration. So essentially, depending on the size you're making, you'll have a set number of V-stitches there, then you'll skip that second half of the V-stitch there and double crochet in the first double crochet after that to sort of anchor down and create the straight sides here for your first half of the front of the cardigan. So after that, rows 2 through 10, again, of the left front mesh are exactly the same as we were doing here. We would simply work a double crochet in that first stitch, whether it's a chainless starting double crochet or a chain 3 is up to you, and then V-stitch in each V-stitch across, right in that chain 1 space. Finally getting into some of this yarn here, going through this skein. There we go. Until you get to the end, and then of course just finish it off with a double crochet in the top of the last double crochet. So you have done all these stitches before, you're just doing them for about half as wide, like so. So you would just continue doing another, like I say, 10 rows total, so you'd have 20 rows total of V-stitch mesh. After that, you're ready to begin the left front shoulder. Okay, so continuing with the left front shoulder, we're essentially going from the mesh back to this solid section here. So what we want to do is work a double crochet of whatever type you prefer there in the first stitch, right in the top of that previous double crochet. And then we're just going to front loop only extended half double crochet in each stitch and chain across until one stitch remains. So that means in the top of the V stitches, we want to go under that front loop only to make an extended half double crochet. And then we want to do the same thing in the chains. I actually like to go into the front loop of the chain here, not the chain space. I find it just gives a really nice straight edge. That said, if you're one of those people who hates trying to crochet into a chain like that, you could go ahead and work right into the chain space if you prefer. I accidentally grabbed both loops there, front and back. I want to make sure that I'm only working under the front loop here of both the stitches and the chains, if possible. And of course, I would continue doing this all the way across all of my V stitches until I got to the end here where we've got that one double crochet hanging out at the end. And then we just make our standard double crochet under both top loops there at the end. So as you can see, at this point now, we're back to a nice solid row. It should be about half as wide, almost, not quite, depending on the size as your back shoulders there. But you can see this is going to come down and make the front of the sweater. So we would need to make as many front shoulder rows here as we had back shoulder rows before we widen back out for the front waist. So I will go ahead and add some more rows here. Again, follow your written pattern. It'll be a total of 7, 9, 11, or 13 of these solid front shoulder rows before we're ready to switch to the waist. So I'll meet you back here when we're ready for that part. Okay, so when you have finished the left front shoulder section, you'll be ready to move on to the left front waist. This is where we widen back out here to create a section that matches this, so we can create the little notch here at the bottom of our sleeves. So we begin again, if I turn and go back this way here, the same way we started this row with a double crochet in the first stitch and front loop only extended half double crochets across. However, rather than stopping with one stitch left, we're going to go ahead and put our extended front loop only extended half double crochet. I'm never sure where to put the extended when I'm saying it out loud. So front loop only extended half double crochet. We'll go ahead and do that all the way across, including the final stitch of this row, because what we're going to do is extend this row by adding 3 more stitches onto the end. And I will show you how to do that here in just a second. I've got one more, it looks like, after this one. There we go. So now I've worked under the front loop only of that stitch right there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to extend this row with 3 or 6 foundation double crochets, depending on what size you're making. So if you're making one of the 2 smaller sizes, you'll remember we went in 3 on each end. So now we're going to have to add 3. If you're making the larger sizes, we lost 6 stitches, so you would be adding 6. But the technique is the same, no matter how many numbers you're adding. I'm going to yarn over, and I'm going to go into both those loops. Even though we worked into the front loop only for that previous stitch, I'm going to go under the front loops, or excuse me, both loops of the last stitch of the previous row, the one we just made that last front loop only extended half double crochet into. I'm going to go ahead and pull up a loop. Now this is going to act as our chain stitch at the base of this first double crochet. So what I need to do is yarn over and pull up a loop to begin our double crochet. Then I'm going to yarn over and pull through 2 and yarn over and pull through 2. So right there I've increased by 1 stitch. To add another, I'm going to yarn over and I'm going to go under the 2 loops here at the bottom of the one I just made. Those sort of act as our chain. If you made foundation double crochet stitches before, this should look familiar. So we pull a loop through there, and this makes the bottom chain underneath this next stitch. So I yarn over and pull through 1 to begin our double crochet, then yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. So now we've made an additional 2 stitches. Now, because of our little swatch here, I'm just going to make 1 more. So I'll yarn over, go under the 2 loops of that stitch I just made, right at the bottom there. Remember I said that X is the chain? That's the part we want to go under with our hook. Then we can pull up our loop here, yarn over, pull through just the first one, then yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. So right there, we have increased our row by 3 stitches. If you're making one of the 2 larger sizes, you'll want to go ahead and add 3 more. But after that, we can continue working in pattern. Just as before, we were working all the way across, whether it was the back waist or the back shoulders or the front shoulders. Now for the front waist, we're going to do the same thing. Go ahead and make a double crochet in the first stitch, front loop only, extended half double crochet across till 1 stitch remains, and then double crochet in the last stitch. Just make sure that however many rows you work here is the same number of rows you worked here at the back waist. So if you took off rows or added rows, you'll want to do the same thing in this section right here. Otherwise, you'll just work till those match up there. So then we'll have our armhole and our sides made, and then I will come back here and show you how we begin that second half. All right, so after you've finished your left front waist, you'll go ahead and break your yarn and finish it off. And if I pull this up here, you can see when we fold that over, we have finished our first front. That means it's time to come back in and make the second half of the front. So this is where you're going to want to begin with that marked stitch. Now on our little swatch here, it's not as well centered as it might have been, or hopefully it will be, on your finished sweater, or your full-size sweater, I should say. But for the sake of just continuing with our demonstration here, I'm just going to pretend that's the right stitch for this tiny little sweater. Now I like to join here with a double crochet, which is a standing double crochet, and I do have tutorials for this on my page. If you prefer, you can start with a join with a slip stitch and chain 3. However you like to begin a row of double crochets. After you've joined your double crochet to the marked stitch, you're just going to make a V-stitch in the chain 1 space of each V-stitch across. And there should be a space right there, but on our little swatch I didn't have enough stitches to do it, so for the sake of time here, we'll just continue on across and pretend this works as a full-size sweater. So like I said, just V-stitch in the chain 1 of each V-stitch across until you get to the end here, and then of course double crochet in that very last stitch. And from there you can just mirror what you did before. You'll chain or double crochet in that first stitch, however you like to do it. V-stitch in each chain 1 of each V-stitch across, and then double crochet in the last one. So you can see hopefully here as I finish up this row how easy it is to just come back and add that second side. It's going to be just as you were doing before. The only big change here is going to be adding those extra 3 to 6 stitches for this half of the front. So here I will just finish off working into the top of that standing double crochet like so, and you can see if I move it up here, I've made the second half of the front mesh. Again, this would be another 10 rows, so you have 20 total on each side here, but for the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and stop there and make my right front shoulder. Now again, this is just front loop only, extended half double crochet worked even, 1 in each stitch and chain space. So I'm going to go ahead and make those now, and I'll meet you when we're ready to begin our right front waist, where we need to add those extra 3 stitches. All right, so after you've finished your right front shoulder, or left front shoulder if you're left-handed, it is time to make this front waist portion. Now, if you look at our finished, semi-finished little swatch here, you can see before when we extended, we were coming on this side, but now we need to extend out on this side, so we need to do it a little bit differently. What we're going to do is chain 5 or 8, again, depending on the size you're making, right now, just right at the end of the previous row of the right front shoulder. So go ahead and chain 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 if you're making one of the smaller sizes, or 8 if you're making one of the 2 larger sizes. Then we're going to turn and double crochet in the 3rd chain from the hook. So we'll skip those 2 chains closest to the hook and double crochet in the chain after that. And it's fine to go ahead and work under both of those top 2 loops to make that double crochet. There we are. Now, these 2 skipped chains here are not going to count as a stitch. So if you need to, you can go ahead and put a stitch marker right in the top of that first double crochet you just made, so that you know when you come back the other direction, this is going to be your last stitch of the row. Pull that loop back down here. Then I am just going to double crochet in each of the 2 remaining chains. And of course there would be 3 more than that if I were making the larger sizes. And this is how we add our 3 stitches here to this side of our front. Always takes a little bit of concentration to work through those chains. Let's try and straighten that out so you can see there. There we are. And now we have added our 3 stitches. So I'm ready to work back across, and I can jump on over to working front loop only, extended half double crochets. You could try and work front loop only, extended half double crochets into those chains if you prefer. It is up to you. It's pretty much going to get hidden right in the armpit, so it's whatever is easiest for you. And then of course I'll stop when I have 1 stitch left and double crochet in there. But I'm almost there already on our little swatch. And again, depending on the size you're making, you're going to have a lot more stitches than this. But we just work our way across until one stitch remains and then double crochet under both loops there. And if I lay this out here again, you can see when I fold that over, then this gives us those 3 extra stitches to match up there. So you can always check your work, make sure that's ending up on the right side and you haven't accidentally switched them and you're not putting your shoulders in here. Make sure they're on the outside and they match up with your back. And then, of course, just make sure you crochet the same number of rows so you get the same length, 20 or 22 if you're following the pattern, or whatever number you're chosen. And I will see you when we have finished the right front waist. Okay, so when you have finished your right front waist, or left front if you're left-handed, you'll go ahead and break that yarn. And if we look at our little swatch here, you can see now our waists are the same width, our shoulders are the same width, and everything is ready to be assembled before we add the sleeves and our finishing touches. Now, our first step of assembly is to sew the sides. Let me go ahead and pull these strings out of the way here. We're going to be sewing just the front waist section to the back waist section. We don't want to sew the tops of either of these notches or any of the shoulder rows together. That's going to leave our space for our sleeves. So just the waist sections get sewn together. Now you're going to want to use your stitch markers at this point to make sure you line them up really well. It is really, really easy to get off track when you are seaming like this. So you want to use your stitch markers and take your time and just make sure that you're lining it up. Now I've just got a little swatch here, so it makes sense for me to join up each row kind of at the top there. But of course, on a longer one, you could join up every few or so. It is up to you. But like I said, this just really will help you stay on track. After you've got your stitch markers on, lay it out, make sure they're lined up right. Check it several times while you're sewing. There we go. You can see I've got them nice and lined up, so when I sew up this seam, I'll know they'll match together. So I like to do this actual sewing of these seams using the mattress stitch. Here on the other side, I just actually cut this off as a really long tail so I could be a little lazier and sew them together. But basically, the mattress stitch is a method of working from behind on each side. So we'll go ahead and pull this up here. There we go. And then behind on the other side. And this side doesn't have the stitch markers on it, so I'm not quite as prepared for this side, but you can see if I come then back over to this side and come from behind, sort of halfway up the stitch or so. Pull that on through, and then halfway up the stitch on this side. Make sure not to accidentally sew yourself into a knot there. And just gently pull that up. It creates a really nice seam. Now, again, I do have a separate tutorial for this on the Moogly blog channel and linked at the link in the description that uses a contrasting yarn, so it's a lot easier to see. So if you're not familiar with the mattress stitch, please do go to that tutorial. So after you've got your sides seamed up, it's time to add the sleeves. Okay, so after you've seamed up your sides, you should have basically a little vest. This is a great time to try it on and just make sure everything fits really well before you weave in your ends. Of course, here I've woven in my ends to make it a little bit easier to see as we add our sleeves. Now the sleeves are the same for each armhole, so it doesn't matter which one you make first. What we're going to do is find the 6, or if you're making the 2 larger sizes, the 12 stitches there at the bottom in the notch, those little side bits that stuck out. And we're going to go ahead and join to the first one of those in the middle. So if I'm working from this side, it would be that one. If I'm working from the other sleeve, it would be this one, just to make it a little bit easier to find. Then we're going to go ahead and join our yarn. Let me find my end here and pull that through. And then we are going to extended half double crochet in each stitch. Not front loop only, just extended half double crochet, so you don't have to worry about that. Now you can start this row again with a chain 2 if you prefer, or whatever kind of stitch you like. Chain 3 for a double crochet or extended front double crochet, whatever you like to do. Basically, you want something about the height of a double crochet stitch. If you would like to go ahead and try and join with an extended half double crochet, I can demo that for you now. I'm going to yarn over twice, just as I did to join with a double crochet. Then I'll go into that stitch, pull up 1 loop, yarn over, pull through that first loop, and yarn over and pull through all 3. So again, however you'd like to begin this. If you'd like to just go ahead and join with a double crochet, you can do that too. This is right in the armpit, so unless you walk around with your arms sticking up, no one's going to see it. Then we just extended half double crochet, like I say, on around. So we're going to work into the remainder of these stitches down here and the bottom of our arm opening, like so. And then when we get there, what we want to do is work 2 extended half double crochets in the side of each front loop only extended half double crochet row. So however many of these shoulder rows you've got, you're going to work 2 extended half double crochets right into the side of each of these rows. Now, working into the sides of rows can be a little bit tricky and is a little bit more of an art form sometimes than a science. You want to use your best judgment in terms of where to place the stitches, and it's totally normal, acceptable, and usual to pull several of them out and put them back where you want them and sort of play with it a little bit on your own. However you do it, you want to get about 2 of those in the side of each of these rows. Whether or not you work around the entire stitch or split the stitch a little bit, as I'm doing here, is again totally up to you. Everybody's got the look they like best. So just take your time and work 2 extended half double crochets in the side of each of these extended half double crochets shoulder rows. Now on our little swatch, of course, I'm almost there. So you just want to continue working up here until you get right to these mesh rows, which is what I'm about to hit now. So let me get this last extended half double crochet in here. Like I say, you just have to take your time with it a little bit. That one's a little wonky. If this was going to be a real sweater, I would definitely pull that one back out and replace it there. Let's try a little lower. That one was sticking out like a little bit of a sore thumb. Sore thumb even. There we go. All right, there. All right, so we've got our 2 extended half double crochets worked into the side of each extended half double crochet row in the shoulder. Now, when we get to the mesh rows, of course, no matter what size you're making, in your full size sweater, you're going to have 20 rows of this V-stitch mesh to work into. So what we're going to do is simply come over here to this first V-stitch row and work a V-stitch right into the side of it. So wherever in that stitch is easiest for you to work into, go ahead and put a V-stitch right there. So that's a double crochet, chain 1, double crochet, worked right into the side of that row, like so. Then you're going to skip the next V-stitch row. So if it's a little tricky to see, you can go ahead and turn it back this way. We worked into the side of this one, so we're going to skip this one. We want to work into the side of this one down here. So we can find that stitch on the end and turn back and go right into the side of that stitch. So it's just every other row of V-stitch mesh gets a V-stitch worked into the side of it. So since you'll have 20, that means you'll skip the side of that very last V-stitch row. On our little swatch here, I only did 4, so I would skip this one here. Then you're just going to come back down here. This would be the back shoulders. So you're going to work 2 extended half double crochets in the side of each of these rows, just as we did before. Now, if you started, of course, with the other sleeve, you would have been working to the front or the back first for this section, but that's okay. It's the same thing. When you're in the shoulder rows, you work 2 stitches in the side of each row. When you're in the mesh rows, you just do every other one. So we'll work our way back down here until we get to those little notches in the sides. So I've got one more shoulder row to work into. You'll of course have a few more. Get my second one in there. And then we are back down at that little notch here at the bottom of this one. So we just jump right on down to the first one of those. Work an extended half double crochet in that one and the last 2, or however many are left in yours. So get under both of those loops there. There we are. And then we can simply join to the first stitch made, whether that was a chain 3 or a double crochet, however it works for you. Of course, mine's being fiddly. It doesn't want to open up. Normally I would have stuck a stitch marker in there to help me keep that a little easier to get into, but for the sake of time I didn't, and it came back to bite me. Get under those 2 loops. There we go. Now I can go ahead and join to my first stitch. And if that wants to gap open a little bit there, you can go ahead and pull it down on that tail end. And when you weave that end in, you can even sew it together if you like. Now, rounds 2 through 5 of the sleeves are all going to be about the same. This, however, these sleeves are made with turned rows, or turned rounds, also known as joined rows. So that means normally when working in the round and we join like this, we would keep working in that direction, almost like a step up and around, step up and around, always working the same direction. For turned rounds, what we're going to do is actually turn our work and as if we hadn't joined, and work back the other direction. This creates a really straight seam underneath the sleeve. It keeps it nice and straight so it doesn't wander off around the sleeve, and it doesn't slant like it can in so many other projects worked in the round. So a really good tip when you're making these stitches, let me go ahead and pull that loop up high. I really want to strongly recommend that you use a series of stitch markers when you're making the sleeves. You'll want to put a stitch marker in the first stitch of each round, in this case the one I joined to, as well as the last stitch of each round. And by the last stitch, I mean the last extended half double crochet or whatever actual stitch you've made, not the slip stitch join. That does not count as a stitch. And it's really easy when you're working turned rounds to accidentally end up working back into that. So with that done, we can go ahead and turn to work back row 2 from the inside of the sleeve. Now I'm going to have you go ahead and start each of these rows with a chain 2. And then you're going to front loop only extended half double crochet in each extended half double crochet stitch. So we've got this stitch here. We know this was the last stitch of our round previously, so it's going to be the first stitch we work back into here. See where it can get really confusing? You can accidentally work into that slip stitch. This is where that stitch marker comes in really handy. So we'll just go under that front loop. We split it a little bit with our stitch marker, but that's okay. We won't split it with our hook. And make our extended half double crochet, like so. Now, when you have finished that first extended half double crochet, move this stitch marker from the stitch you just crocheted into to the top of this stitch. And this way you'll know that is the first stitch when you come back around to the other direction. And it'll tell you which stitch to join to. So from there, we just continue around working a front loop only extended half double crochet in each stitch until we get up to those V stitches. So I will see you when we get to the mesh section. All right, so as you're working your extended half double crochets in each extended half double crochet stitch, I just want to point out that it can be really easy to end up missing that last one. Remember, your V stitches, let me turn around here, are made of a double crochet, chain 1 double crochet, so you need to work right up until that first double crochet of your first V stitch. When you come to the V stitch section, what you're going to do is work 3 extended half double crochets into the chain space of the first V. So there's 1, go right in that chain space, 2, and there's 3. And then you're just going to V-stitch in each chain space of each V-stitch across until you've got 1 V-stitch left. So this means when you made round 1 of the sleeves, you should have had 10 V-stitches, because remember we worked every other row of 20 rows. So when you are working across, you're going to have a lot more V-stitches essentially than I did. Because I've just got my little swatch here, I really only had 2 V-stitches in my shoulder mesh. Again, when you're making the full one, you'll have these 3 stitches worked into the first V-stitch, 8 more V-stitches to work into, and then you'll have 1 more V-stitch left. Because I'm on my tiny little swatch, it's almost as if we have skipped that whole section. So let me go ahead and pull up the sleeve so we can, on the finished sweater, so we can take a little bit closer look at that together. All right, so here we're looking at the finished sweater, which will give a better demonstration of this section. You can see we've worked evenly here, and then we've worked a V-stitch in the side of each of those V-stitch rows. So this was row 1 of our sleeves. Now, row 2, of course, is being worked from the inside, but here I'm going to go ahead and show it to you from the outside. When we come to that first V-stitch on row 2 of the sleeves, we'll work our 3 extended half double crochet stitches right there in that first chain 1 space. Then we'll V-stitch in each chain 1 space of each V across until, let's see here, where are we? There we are, until we get to just 1 left. There we go. And this would have been the last one in row 1. So we come across with row 2, we get to that very last V-stitch, we're going to do the same thing. 3 extended half double crochets into that one, and then just front loop only extended half double crochet on around. So by doing this, we are coming in by 1 V in each round. So we've got 3 half double crochets, eliminating 1 V on each end there in row 2, 1 on each end in row 3, until we get down to the point on, it is row 5 here. Let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, where just 2 V-stitches are left right there in the middle. After that, we'll just be working evenly and maintaining those 2 V-stitches right on down our sleeve until we get to the cuff. So let me pull back up my swatch, and we're going to go ahead and pretend we're at round 6 so I can show you how to finish each of these rounds and continue on down the sleeve. All right, so every round of the sleeve, starting in round 2 on through the very end of the sleeve before you begin the cuff, is going to end the same way. we're going to front loop only, extended half double crochet in each stitch until one stitch remains. This is where we want to have that stitch marker in there. We're not going to stitch in that one. We're going to go ahead and skip it and slip stitch to that first stitch we made where we put our first stitch marker there. So that's where these stitch markers again come in super duper handy. So just carefully get under the top 2 loops there, and you can go ahead and finish off that row or round. Then you can go ahead and pull that stitch marker out of the stitch you skipped rather, and you're going to want to put that in the last stitch you made. Again, not the slip stitch, but the last stitch you made, like so. Then you're ready to go ahead and turn and make the next row of your sleeve. You're going to continue making these sleeve rows until you have made 24 or 26 rows, again, depending on your size. Now, as you can see, by skipping that last stitch, these sleeves are going to narrow, and they're also only 3/4 length. So if you want longer sleeves, you can add more rows, try it on as you go, and decide what sleeve length and fit is going to be best for you. After you have finished those 24 to 26 rows for the sleeve, then it's time to begin the cuff, which is the same for both sleeves and for all sizes. All right, so when it's time to begin the cuff, after you've turned after your last round of the sleeve, you should be working from the outside of the sleeve. We're going to begin row 1 of the cuff with a chain 1, and then single crochet in each stitch and chain around. So remember, we've got our stitch marker here, so that's actually the first stitch, like so. And you can go ahead and move that stitch marker on up. There we are. And then you can just single crochet in each stitch and chain around. For these, you'll want to go under both loops. And when you work into the chains, again, you can make a choice. I decided to work under the top 2 loops of the chains. I think it just gave a little bit more of a polished look here. But if you really don't like doing that, you can work into the chain space instead. Just work all the way around till you get to those. You've got those V stitches, single crochet, excuse me, in the double crochet. Let me try that again. Single crochet in the double crochet, then single crochet in the chain, like so, and then the next double crochet. And of course, you should only have 2 V stitches at this point. So in the double crochet, in the chain, I like to use, I used to like to use the hook there, kind of pull that bottom loop down out of the way there. Then the second double crochet of that one, and then easy peasy on around for round 1 of the cuff. Now, unlike the sleeves, the cuffs are not turned. So once we get to the cuff section, we're going to join, but we're not going to work from the inside of the sleeve anymore. So I'm almost there, and we're also not going to skip this last stitch like we were doing in the sleeves. At this point, we want our cuffs to be straight. We don't want the sleeves to taper anymore. So go ahead and single crochet in that very last marked stitch, the one we would have skipped on the previous rows. There we are. Might be easier if I'd taken this stitch marker out first. Get that out of the way there. And then we can go ahead and put a stitch marker in that last stitch, so we don't get it mixed up with our slip stitch, which will join our row. Again, a little bit easier sometimes if you take the stitch marker out first. Like so. There we go. And then we are ready to begin round 2 of the cuff. Now, round 2 of the cuff, again, same for all sizes. We're going to start with a chain 1, and then we're going to front post double crochet in the next stitch. So that is a yarn over, and coming from the front of the stitch, you're going to go around the post. So come in on one side, go behind the stitch, and come back out the front on the other side of the post. Then yarn over, pull that loop on around, and finish a double crochet as normal. If you need more instruction on front post double crochet and the back post, which I'm about to show you, I do again have a separate tutorial for this. So you do a front post, then a back post. The back post is the same thing, but this time we're going to come from the back of the fabric. So you yarn over, come from behind around the next stitch, go around that post out the back of the fabric, yarn over, pull that loop all the way around that post and up, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. So we're just going to continue alternating front post and back post all the way around the cuff. When we get to the end, there will be either no stitches remaining after that last back post or 1 stitch remaining. So let's tackle that when we get there. All right, now depending on what size you've made and whether or not you decided to extend your sleeves or shorten them, again, you can totally customize the sweater to make it suit you. You may have one stitch left after you make a back post double crochet. If you've got two stitches left, you can do another set, a front post and then a back post. But if there's just one stitch left, that would of course mess up sort of our ribbing pattern. So we're just going to go ahead and skip that one on this round. And then join to the top of that first front post double crochet you made, like so. Then for row 3 of the cuffs, or round 3 I should say, it's just the same thing. We chain 1, front post front post double crochet around the first stitch and back post double crochet around the next. Basically maintain your stitch pattern. Then you can just join to the top of your first front post double crochet at the end of round 3. So I will see you when we get to that point in the pattern. All right, so here on the finished sweater, you can see I have finished round 3 of the cuff. So we've maintained our stitch pattern. You can see where I did end up skipping one on round 2 there. And then for round 4 of the cuff is simply slip stitching in each stitch around. I find it gives it a little extra sturdiness and stability. If you prefer the look of a single crochet, you can do that too. It's up to you. I just did one round of slip stitch and then join and finish it off. And then of course repeat that for both cuffs. You can see here the top of the sleeve, we've maintained those 2 V's down all the way down the sleeve for some mesh. And if I pull this up here, you can see by skipping that last stitch, we've created a really great tapered shape. So you would repeat this sleeve, like I said, exactly for the other side of your sweater, for the other armhole. And then finally, all that's left is the bottom hem and the final edging. All right, so I've pulled my swatch back up here so I can demonstrate how to begin the bottom edging. Now you're going to want to find the bottom corner of your garment. So this would be the top opening here. You can see it's our little swatch, so I haven't quite finished all that off, but you would want to join at the bottom hem edge here. And you want to do that from the right side of the sweater. And one thing I've done to help you visualize the right side of the sweater is this line right here will continue all the way across. If you look at the inside of the sweater, that line right there is missing because that first row is double crochet instead of extended half double crochet, so it doesn't have a line there. So you can always tell the right side as that sort of pinstripe line of texture there goes across the outside of the sweater. So you'll want to find that first stitch there to join to. Now there you can join with a double crochet, which I've demonstrated, the standing double crochet, or you can join with a slip stitch and chain 3 if that's the double crochet joining method that you prefer. Basically, we're just going to go right down in here. Now this would have been the final row of our front, but as we crochet across, we'll end up working into the foundation row of the back and then finishing up, of course, on the final row of our other half of the front of the sweater. So I'll just go ahead and join with my double crochet there. And then I'm just going to double crochet in each stitch across the bottom hem. So like I said, whether that is the front or the back, it will either be the last row or the foundation chain. It is up to you. If you did chain across and double crochet into there, you may only have one loop remaining to work into. Or if you did it like I do, I like to crochet into the back hump when I am crocheting into a foundation chain or a starting chain, and that leaves me 2 loops in the end then to work into for any edgings. So again, I'm just going to work my way all the way across. When I come to the seams, use your best judgment. If you need to throw an extra stitch in there or something, you can. It's totally up to you, whatever looks best to you. Go ahead and make it work for you. The actual stitch count here for this round, or excuse me, this row, does not matter, and that's why I have not listed one. You just want to make sure to work into each stitch, and then if you need to add ones in the seam or skip over the seam, I usually skip over it, but if you feel it looks better to add one there, you can do it however you like. So again, I will just continue to double crochet across the bottom of the sweater here until I get to the end of the row, and then I will turn and come back the other direction from the inside of the sweater for row 2. So that's where I'll see you next. All right, so once you've made row 1 of the bottom hem, you should have worked all the way across the bottom of the sweater. Then you're ready to turn for row 2 and chain 1, and we're going to just single crochet in the first stitch, like so. And then we're going to create another ribbed edging here, sort of like we did in our cuff. But this time we want to start with the back post double crochet. So yarn over, go around that second stitch post there from back to front, pull that loop up, yarn over and pull through 2, and yarn over and pull through 2. Then the next stitch will be a front post. So we come from the front of the fabric around the post, pull up our yarn, pull through 2, pull through 2. So we're just going to maintain that across until 1 stitch remains, and then, as you may have guessed, we will single crochet in the very last stitch. Now, depending on how many stitches you have here, you may need to add another back post double crochet at the end, and that is totally fine. So just front post, back post. You don't have to end on a particular one because we're not joining to work in the round. This is just a flat ribbed bottom. The actual stitch count, again, does not matter. So as long as you single crochet in the very last stitch and alternate front and back post across otherwise, you'll be all set for row 2. So that's what I will do here, and then I will see you when we're ready for row 3. All right, so at the end of row 2, you've been working from the inside of the sweater and you've created this great rib using front and back post stitches. Make sure though that very last stitch you work a single crochet in the top, no matter what that previous stitch may have been. Rows 3 and 4 will be identical to each other. We're going to chain 1 and turn, or turn and chain 1, however you like to do it. Single crochet again in the first stitch, and then what we're going to do is maintain the post stitch pattern across to the last stitch and then finish it off with a single crochet in the last stitch. So what does that mean? That means when I flip it over this way, when I finished row 2, you can see here I finished it with a front post double crochet. It's in front texture-wise, it's not behind. So when I flip it over, from this side, it looks like a back post double crochet. So that's what I want to do first. I want to maintain that ribbed look. So when I see what looks like a back post double crochet, I want to back post double crochet around that post as well, like so. Then, if I see here, this looks like a front post double crochet, I want to go around it like a front post double crochet. And like I say, that will maintain that great ribbed look all the way across. So you'll do that for 2 more rows. Let me pull up the finished sweater here so we can see what that looks like. All right, here we have the finished sweater. You can see here these posts would have, or these stitches would have been that first row of the bottom hem, and then we have 1, 2, 3 rows of the post stitches. After that 4th row of post stitch, which will be finished from the inside of the sweater, you'll be ready to turn and work from the outside of the sweater again, and that is where we begin the final edging. So let me go ahead and set this aside again, and we'll work the final edging together. All right, so round 1 of the final edging, like I said, we're going to turn and work back from the outside of the sweater. There's 2 rounds of final edging, both worked from the right side of the sweater. So we are going to start by chaining 1 and simply single crocheting in each stitch right across the bottom hem. So right across the previous row that you've been working. When we get to the end of this row, that's where we're going to turn and work along the front opening of our sweater. So I'm just going to continue single crocheting right along the 4th row of our bottom hem. Of course, I didn't actually make 4 rows here on our little swatch, but you get the idea. So when I get to the end of this row, then I will show you how to turn and tackle the front opening of our sweater. All right, so in round 1 of the final edging, when you have single crocheted across each stitch of the previous row, you're going to come to the end of the row here. At this point, we're going to chain 2, 1 and 2, and this will create the corner that allows us to start crocheting along the front opening of our sweater. Now, when you've made the full cuff, there should be 3 rows that end in single crochet and begin with single crochet, those post stitch rows. So you're going to want to work a single crochet in the side of each of those rows, just 1 single crochet in the side of each of those. Then you're eventually going to get to the point here where you have your double crochet row, the first row of round 1. Now this double crochet row and then the front loop only extended half double crochet rows right on up here until we get to this mesh section again, we're going to treat these all the same. What we're going to do is single crochet in the side of the row, like so, and then chain 1 and then come to the side of the next row and work a single crochet there. Now, normally when I would work into the side of the row, the same way I did for the sleeves, I would work 2 stitches in the side of each row. When I work into the sides of these rows here at the front, I really like the look if I just do 1 and then chain 1 and then skip to the next row. The key here is to make sure that those chain 1s are big enough that it isn't pulling in on the front and causing a gather. You need to make sure your chain 1s are loose enough that they are just as wide as a standard single crochet stitch, or as wide as your single crochet stitch, I guess I should say. But if you do that, it's a little bit easier than trying to squeeze those stitches into the sides of the rows, and it creates a really nice straight edge. We're going to come around again with a second row of edging that will fill in those chain ones, but I really like the look I get by using this technique. If you prefer, you can absolutely work 2 single crochets in the sides of each of these rows, or whatever number gives you the look you desire. So I'm just going to keep working here like so along the side of these rows till I get to the mesh rows, and then truth be told, I'm going to treat the mesh rows exactly the same way. Single crochet in the side of the row, jump to the next row. So you can see here, we're at our little mesh rows. I'm just going to work a single crochet in the side of that one, chain 1, jump down to the next one. You can keep turning your work here and kind of line up your rows if need be to see where you're at. Again, stitch count here doesn't particularly matter. So whatever feels good to you as you're crocheting along here, whatever looks good, whatever gives you a nice even line, that's the stitch number you want to have. When you get to the top here, at the top back of the neck, I guess it would be, you've got a couple options. For the different sizes, a couple of these stitches get skipped. For some of the smaller sizes, they don't. So you can just jump, if they don't get skipped, you can jump right on over here. If you've got some skipped stitches, we'll pretend this one was skipped. You can work a stitch right in there. Just work your way over to the other half here, and then you can start again with a single crochet, chain 1, jump to the next row. And you work your way all the way down across the second half of this row, or the second half of the front of the sweater, I guess I should say, till you get down here, work in the sides of each of those single crochets, and then you can chain 2 and join to the first single crochet you made of this round. So I'm going to go ahead and make those stitches now, and I will see you when we get back down here to the hem. Okay, so after you have finished crocheting across the bottom hem and then all the way around that front opening, you're going to be back at the bottom hem. So again, we want to chain 2 to create the second corner there, and then join with a slip stitch to that first single crochet we made right at the bottom hem there, like so. Then we are ready for round 2 of our final edging and the final round of our entire sweater. What we're going to do is chain 1 and single crochet in each stitch to the corner. So again, I will see you when we get to the corner, which is that first chain 2 space here at the end of the bottom. So I'm going to work my way across, and I'll see you when we get to the chain 2. All right, so here you can see I have single crocheted all the way across the bottom hem, and I've come to that chain 2 space in the corner here. In that chain 2 space, I'm going to go ahead and work a single crochet, followed by another chain 2 and a single crochet. Now, this is our final round, so if you have a different corner you prefer to that chain 2, you can go ahead and make it there. Some people prefer a chain 1 and some people prefer a chain 3. It's totally up to you. Now, as we work along the front opening, again, we're going to single crochet in each single crochet, but when we come to it here, which will be after the first few stitches, when we come to those chain 1 spaces, go ahead and make a single crochet right in the space. So you'll single crochet in the next stitch, and then in the chain 1 space, and then in the next stitch, there we go, and then in the next space. And we'll just continue doing that all the way across the front until we get to that second chain 2 space there. Then we'll single crochet, chain 2, single crochet back in that final chain 2 space, and then we can join to the first single crochet we made, and we'll be done with our sweater. All we'll have left to do is weave in our ends. Let's go ahead and take another look at the finished Paloma cardigan. Alrighty, so here we'll take a closer look again at that finished hem and final edging. You can see here we did those ribbings, and then we've got our 2 rows of single crochet. Down here at the corner, I've got my chain 2 space right there. And then as I work along the front, you can see, I'll put my hand behind it here, you can see I worked into each stitch and each chain space, and it just creates this really nice straight edge. And you don't have to try and wiggle your hook into the sides of some of those stitches. You can just find the place on each row where it's really easy to go ahead and put that stitch and then chain 1 and skip over the rest of that row. When you come back along with that solid row of single crochet, it creates a really nice finished edge. And that's how you crochet the Paloma cardigan. I hope you've enjoyed this tutorial. If you have, please give it a thumbs up and let us know what you think in the comments. Thank you to Red Heart and Clover for providing the materials for this pattern. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to subscribe. Happy crocheting!